Let's turn to the Notre Dame defense. And, this group I thought was really they had it's a really impressive group, and it's a very well coached football team, and a group that you have to respect their grittiness, because when you think about this game, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, man, one of my concerns coming out of the game was, the edge pressure is not great. Like they got a lot of up the middle pressure, but man, the edge pressure wasn't great in this game. And Stanford doesn't have great tackles. And then you're thinking, but good Lord, they played this game without Boubacar Traore. They played this game without Jordan Patelho. They didn't have Jason Onye in the game. You look at it and you're just like, man, it's like, well, they're overcoming quite a bit to be able to go out there and still have the performance that they did. Overall, I thought this was a strong performance from the Notre Dame offense. Obviously, you shut down Stanford in a way that none of their previous opponents had been able to shut them down, including including Clemson. Obviously, Clemson gave up 14 points to Stanford, and their victory over the Cardinal. Virginia Tech called them 7 points. Those are their backup quarterback, so that's a little bit different. But your offensive production for the Cardinal, they had 200 yards of offense. Their lowest of the season was the week before against Virginia Tech with 258, which was obviously, as I said, done with their backup quarterback. The 3.39 yards per attempt was also their lowest output of the season. Their 113 rushing yards was their lowest output of the season. Their 2.8 yards per carry was their lowest output of the season. Their 87 passing yards was their lowest output of the season by 35. They even threw the ball for more yards last week against Virginia Tech without their starting quarterback. It was the first time all season they had failed to throw a touchdown pass in a game. Their 4.8 yards per attempt was not their lowest output, but it was right with all the others. And their 96.16 quarterback rating was the second lowest they've had all season. The 89.26 against Clemson was the only one that was better. Their 10 completions was also their lowest output of the season, and their lowest output since only completing 10 on September 9th of last season against USC. So, you dominated them in a way that none of their opponents had dominated them, and that's really where you want to be, especially when you're playing Game 7, or this would be Game 6 for both teams. So that was an impressive performance, and they did it without a lot of guys that we thought we'd be seeing this team count on coming into the season. So you have to respect them a lot for what they have been able to overcome and still go out there and make plays. And it was great to see Gabriel Rubio back. He played well. Josh Burnham comes back. He played extremely well. You got Christian Gray back. He was a little bit rusty. Had some plays where he wasn't as good, some others where he was good. But overall, it was a strong performance by the Notre Dame defense. And you think about it, I don't know how you guys are, but it's like the way that they play defense now and the way they played defense last year coming into the season, it's almost like I find myself at times maybe being a little bit too critical of the defense, where it's like you're coming down on them for not playing well enough in this situation, but it's still, look at the numbers. They're shutting people down, and it's kind of a byproduct of how good they are, because they'll have these performances where they hold Stanford to their lowest point total of the season. They hold Stanford to their lowest offensive output of the season. They hold Stanford to their fewest rushing yards of the season. They hold Stanford to their fewest passing yards of the season, and you're like, yeah, there's still a lot to clean up. You know what I mean? It's like, you're rolling when you completely shut a team down and hold them to their lowest, statistical categories in almost every capacity. And at the end of the game, I'm like, yeah, it was good, but I know it was their lowest third down performance of the season from a percentage standpoint. It was tied for the lowest and fewest third downs allowed. I get all that, but they got to get a little bit better here, a little bit better there. Stanford goes 1 of 4 on fourth down. Coming into the game, Stanford was 9 of 16 on fourth down. They were over 50% on fourth down. They went 3 for 3 on fourth down against Virginia Tech. Notre Dame, they go 1 of 4 against them. And you're just like, yeah, I know, but and that's the thing that's funny about this is they have this dominant performance, and I still find myself watching the film being like, yeah, you got to do this better, got to do that better. And you just kind of like, okay, this is how you know you have an elite defense. When you're putting up elite numbers and you're like, yeah, but I expected them to be even better. Like, that's when you know you've got a great defense. And so I had to kind of keep that in mind as I was going through the film, because I was actually really critical of the defense at first going through it, because I'm just like, well, you got to do that better, do that better. And it's almost to the point where, like, I expect perfection from the defense. And when I don't get it, I'm like, yeah, you got to do better there. That's really a testament to how well coached this football team is on defense and how well they're playing on defense, that I'm nitpicking these type of performances. And I'm not talking about some of the silly stuff. I heard somebody say, well, what's going to happen when they play a real pass offense? And I'm like, you mean like Louisville? When they held Louisville to their lowest passing output of the season from a yards per attempt standpoint, which is still their lowest output of the season, by the way. Held Louisville to their, second lowest yard. It was actually at the time their lowest yardage total of the season, and, lowest quarterback rating at the time of the season, well below anything else. And you're just like, and that's a pretty darn good pass game. And, they're playing at a high level. There's no doubt. And when you watch the film, you say, okay, they played really well, but there's definitely some areas where I think this team can and should get better. And I'll discuss those a little bit. Just a reminder too, if you do have some questions, just throw those questions in there and I'll try to answer a few of those at the end. I'll only really address questions about this game, and then questions if you have a couple about the polls. I know a couple people had questions about that, so we'll get to those too. But the number one key to victory against Stanford was to keep Ashton Daniels in check. That was the big one, and for the most part, they did. Or they weren't great at it early, and that's where you have to kind of look at it and say, okay, did they adjust as the game went on? Well, to a degree, they did, but a lot of it was just clean up some stuff. I mean, you look at the early part of the game, Ashton Daniels has a, 2nd and 8. He gets a 9-yard completion because you have a missed tackle. Next play, they have a little quick 6-yard completion, no big deal. Then 2nd and 4, they've crossed midfield and you get a gain of 27 yards. Why? You got really good coverage down the field. You've got very good pressure, contain, and your safety steps down into the open window, the fit, and he just misses in space, and the guy runs for 27 yards. You just had those kind of little mistakes in the game early on where you got to make that play. You had a play where Jalen Sneed is coming off the edge, and he's coming off the edge, and he sees the guy going outside, and he just takes a really poor angle to get to him and allows Ashton Daniels to get outside of him for a positive gain. And those are the things you look at and say, you had some sloppiness early in the game. They struggled a little bit with handling certain things that Stanford was doing early, but at the end of the day, they buckled down and kept them in check. I mean, look, a guy like Ashton Daniels, he's going to make a play or two here and there. First drive of the game, he goes for 27 yards. The rest of the game, Ashton Daniels gained 75 yards. So he didn't gain a whole lot after that. He got almost half his yards in the first couple series, and he had 33 yards in losses. Finished the game with only 42 yards. He was their leading rusher coming in, and only 3-point yards per attempt. He was averaging over 5 coming in. Chris Davis had 10 carries for 45 yards. He was averaging 7.3 yards per carry coming into the game. And so you did a very good job, in my opinion, of keeping the Stanford ground game in check. And a big part of that was keeping their quarterback in check. The other thing, too, is they didn't allow him to really get the ball down the field at all. That was an important part of the game as well, is not let him have some of those shots down the field, some of those big play shots down the field. A lot of the success he had throwing the ball was just little drop-offs, a couple screens, couple little quick throws where they were in sort of a no-cover zone. He could find nothing down the field except for one blown coverage on an over route. So I felt like Notre Dame did a very good job there. I give him a check plus. This is a kid, it's a dangerous player that you held to 74 passing yards and 42 rushing yards. Your starting quarterback only has 116 yards of total offense in a game. You succeeded in keeping him contained as a playmaker. So that's an easy check plus for me. Play smart. We talked a lot early coming into the game that this is a very well coached football team. in Stanford. They're not super talented. They've got a talented quarterback, some talented running backs, one really talented receiver. But overall, this is a team that's successful because of how well coached they are. And you saw that in the game. A lot of different motions. They were putting Emmett Mosley, who's a wide receiver. They were putting him in the game and having him carry the ball out of the backfield in this game, which was not something that we had really seen a ton of, coming into the season. They had done it a little bit. He had 1 carry against Virginia Tech, 2 carries against Clemson. He had 5 against Notre Dame. And they did a great job of handling that. But, they ran a little bit more speed option than we're used to seeing. They did some different wrinkles in the backfield. And Notre Dame had to play smart. And early on, first couple drives, it's not that they didn't play smart. They were slow to react a couple times. There's a couple times you could tell the inside linebackers were not sure what they were seeing, and they were late reacting to a ball. You saw a nice job with the outside players, Xavier Watts, Jordan Clark, Benjamin Morrison did a nice job of funneling things back inside. And then the linebackers were able to clean things up with really nice backside pursuit. So that was good to see. But they adjusted pretty quickly. Early in the game, the speed option was working because they were crashing. Stanford had a really nice scheme. So Notre Dame crashes with their edge, and then they will loop the linebackers around to handle, read zone type of things. Well, so early in the game, Stanford was running outside of the crash and pitching off of that, or pitching off the slot, and they were doing a good job of working their play side tackle and guard up to the second level and getting to the linebackers, so the linebackers couldn't scrape over top. And so that's why they hit a couple of those speed option plays early. Fortunately for Notre Dame, their overall team speed is way better than Stanford's, and so they were able to kind of eat those plays up and not let them get a bunch of chunk yards out of it. But it allowed them to, 4 yards here, 6 yards here. It allowed them to move the chains a little bit early. They started to adjust to it a little bit, but you come out in the second half, and Josh Burnham just makes that great play on it. They were expecting Josh Burnham to crash. Instead, they had Josh kind of feather that play, and then the quarterback thought Josh was going to bite him. He didn't. He then pitches the ball. Josh makes a great instinctive play on it, taps it up in the air, picks it off. I'm going to have to give him a hard time for not scoring. It's a former quarterback that ran for over 1,000 yards as a senior in high school. I was expecting him in the house that one. But it was a great play by Josh. And so you saw Notre Dame make some adjustments there. And there's a couple plays that Stanford had. They had one of their longer runs in the game. I can't remember if it was by Ashton Daniels or not. But he had it was when they were backed up early in the third quarter. It's a 3rd and 7 play. They just had a nice call. They ran right outside of Notre Dame's blitz. It was just a really good call by the Stanford coach, and they hit that one, and then Notre Dame buckled down and, of course, forced the turnover. But overall, they played relatively smart. I'm giving them just a check on this because if you break down the film, you'll see that there was about 3 or 4 plays where a better offensive team might have been able to hit a couple big plays in this game. There was a play where Christian Gray bit on a move, and the guy beat him pretty soundly outside. Maybe the safety gets over, but a good quarterback probably drops that thing on the outside, and it's a 30, 40-yard gain. There was another sort of blown coverage type of look where Benjamin Morrison thought he was going to get safety help. The safety help came late. Fortunately, the pressure got to the quarterback. He had to scramble, couldn't see it. So there was a couple plays like that where I felt like a better coach team might have had a chance to hit a couple more big plays. Wasn't bad, but more than I would like. And teams in the future, if you have those same mistakes, might be able to take advantage of it. I'm thinking part of it was because of how much Stanford throws to their running backs and how much their quarterback runs, that maybe some of the defensive backs were caught peeking in the backfield, but certainly something that you needed to be prepared for. I was also surprised that Stanford didn't do anything like a double pass, no reverses, did some really creative things out of their base offense, but they didn't do anything to really catch Notre Dame. And I really was expecting them to do some things to catch Notre Dame. I was surprised they didn't see that. They didn't. I really am. I thought they would do more of some of those sort of trickery types of things, and they didn't, and Notre Dame was able to shut them down in that game. So I thought play smart. They did a solid job of that. Not necessarily a great job of that. And then the final thing was with the Notre Dame defense was get the ball. And we talked about how, look, this is a team that turns the ball over. Their quarterback had thrown an interception in every game. He didn't throw an interception in this game. Honestly, part of it is because he just never threw the ball down the field. I mean, uh, you were in a unique situation where you didn't have as many opportunities to make plays on the ball in this game because they just never really challenged Notre Dame down the field, to be honest with you. They threw one deep ball to the left that was thrown out of bounds. They had one scramble play down the field on the right. They only attempted 4 passes the entire game beyond 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's it. They went 2 of 4 for 36 yards on throws beyond 10 yards. That they didn't even – they weren't even going to test Notre Dame at all. On the flip side, the other side of that, Riley Leonard went 6 of 10 on throws beyond 20 yards for, let's see here, that's 129 yards on throws of 10 yards down the field. So completely dominated that part of the matchup. So that's partly why you didn't see them get a chance to really to get those. But Stanford did put the ball on the ground 3 times. Notre Dame only recovered 1 of those fumbles, so they only forced 1 turnover in this game. And that's something that you would have liked seeing them do a little bit better job of. But the one fumble that they did recover, they made a great play on it. And it was really – it wasn't a game-changing play because Notre Dame was winning 21-7. But when Josh Burnham made that play, it put the game away. I mean, completely put the game away. I mean, once he makes that recovery and he gets the ball down to the 17-yard line, once they punched it in, the game was over. That was it. And they had no chance after that. So I'll give them a check on this, but it wasn't as good as you like. But honestly, I was a little surprised that Stanford didn't try to do more things to really take more chances in the game. Honestly, I really felt like Coach Taylor realized pretty early that, once Notre Dame kind of jumped on him, is like, look, we're not winning this game. So let's not get too crazy. Let's not show stuff that we want to be able to use on someone we might have a shot with. That may not have been in his mindset, but that's kind of how I felt watching the game. I just expected him to do a little bit more. And then the other thing too is there were some things they did try to get some shots down the field at a couple other times, and there just was nothing there. There was nobody open, and the quarterback wasn't even thinking about throwing the ball down the field. I mean, it's almost like he was just kind of letting the coverage get downfield, and then he was going to take off running. They did a great job, in my opinion, of from a coverage standpoint in this game of completely shutting down Alec Ayamaner, completely shut him down, 3 catches for 16 yards. They did a great job mixing up their coverage looks, doing some bracket coverage at times on different guys where it looks like man, but then Benjamin Morrison would kind of, drop and somebody else would kind of play the inside. And they did some really nice things coverage-wise. I did want to clear one thing up from a coverage standpoint. I broke down that big 4th down play that they stopped it. And so there was a slight adjustment to what I said. So Jack Kaiser jumped into that slant window. Part of the reason Jack Kaiser jumped into that slant window was because of running back wearing a swing. And when he saw that the running back wasn't going vertical, he stopped right in that window for Ayamaner. But they were still doing what we talked about because you also saw Drake Bowen fly inside. So Benjamin overplayed the outside. Jack buzzed downhill in the flats, and then Drake was flying over. If he catches a slant route there, he's getting lit up by Drake Bowen. So they did play it, but I did want to point out that one that one added part to it. It was a very good call, but it was also great recognition by Jack Kaiser to see that back wasn't a threat and sit up underneath that slant window. I thought that was very well played by Jack. But I was really impressed by how much Notre Dame mixed up their coverages in this game. Still playing a lot of man, but really did a lot of different things with some bracketed coverages and things like that. I thought the linebackers did a much better job of hunting routes over the middle. They still have to get better at those over routes when the tight end comes from one side and climbs all the way over top to another, especially on scrambles. They've turned that loose multiple times this season, and you're going to see some team with a really good tight end and the ability to protect the quarterback is going to find that and hit that open. They're going to have to do a better job of that, but they're getting a lot better at finding the in-breaking stuff that's coming in towards them and shutting that down. I was very impressed by what I saw from that group as well. So overall, very strong performance from the Notre Dame defense. Not a lot new that we didn't talk about yesterday. Love the performance of the defensive line. Thought the tackles were every bit as good on film as I thought they were live. Gabriel Ruby had a really solid game. There was actually a play that I thought they ran a perimeter play that I thought Josh Burnham came backside and made the play. It's actually Donovan Heinisch. It was a 40 number, but his hustle on that play was great. I thought their pursuit as a defense was excellent in this game. They did lose contain a few times, and they had some missed tackles, which I didn't like. They still struggled a little bit with motion. There was a couple plays where I was surprised that Troy Taylor didn't do a better job of taking advantage of some of that, to be completely honest with you. That's something that's going to have to kind of figure out. But the pursuit was excellent in this game. I thought the discipline was very good in this game for the most part. I thought they played very hard. They were very physical in this game. Physical as defending routes, physical defending the run. They arrived at the ball with a lot of force. They arrived at blockers with a lot of force. I thought the block destruction in this game from the front seven was as good as it's been all season. Again, not a great offensive line, but did a really great job of that. You're seeing guys like Bryce Young, I thought, is really starting to flash. But you also had some instances in this game where you still early on, you did have some sloppiness because you didn't quite get what you were needing to get from some young players. There was a play early where Bryce he's got to get inside of that B gap, and he didn't. He kind of ran right at the center. Kingston's looping around, so that opened up a cutback lane and allowed the running back to get into that hole. If Bryce just kind of gets across the face of that tackle like he's supposed to, he blows that play up. That's all part of the learning process for him. And same thing for Kingston, same thing for Drake. Those things are all things that, hey, you're going to see this and you're going to make that mistake, but you're going to have to learn from it and get better at it. And I thought he did a really good job of that. Don Schuler comes down early, has that big missed tackle on the 27-yard gain. And then I believe it was the next series where they ran a little bubble screen and he just blows it up, or as a jet sweep. Josh Burnham drives the tackle back. Great recognition by Josh. Adon flies downhill and tackles a guy in the backfield. So it's like, okay, yeah, you messed up. Move on, go make a play, make up for it. And I thought Adon did a really nice job of that. And those are things you want to see. Guys are going to make mistakes, right? But how do you react to that mistake? Okay, well, Don made a big mistake early that cost his team. So what does he go do the next series? I believe it was the next series. He goes and makes a big play that puts Stanford behind the sticks. And now their drive is basically in trouble. So you see those type of things. You say, like, this is a really well-coached team, but also a very mentally tough defense, or they're becoming a mentally tough defense. And Saturday was another great example of that. Absolutely. So a really good win for Notre Dame. Very impressed with that win. I'm going to get to some questions here in a little bit, folks. If you do want to get a question in, I got about 10 of them started right now. Just go ahead and hit that MB on it or the mailbag emoji, and I'll answer some questions that you might have about this game. Or I know there's a question about the polls, so I'll try to get to that as well. But before we do that, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And, of course, as always, if you want to know the best way to support Irish Breakdown, it is always to sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You not only have a great community, you get intel, you get breakdowns that you can't get anywhere else, but it also is the best way to support Irish Breakdown because all the revenue the message board goes to Irish Breakdown. And that's why we were able to make a new hire recently. And that's why we're hoping to make some more hires down the road, is because of when that grows, that's basically what we do with it. It's how we can grow and how we can get bigger and better and continue to hopefully give you even better and better content as we move forward. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com.